Welcome back to Fresh Outlook, everybody. Charter Communications is pursuing a three-way deal with Time Warner Cable and Bright House Networks that will transform it into one of the biggest players in telecommunications. The FCC will now analyze whether the merger is in the best interest of the public, and the Justice Department will assess whether it is anti-competitive. These twin reviews doomed the Comcast bid for Time Warner just about a month ago. Let me introduce you to the Fresh Outlook think tank. I am joined by Dr. Bart Rossi, political psychologist, Elura Nanos, attorney and lifestyle expert, Tom LaVecchia, marketing professional of X Factor Selling Systems, and joining us live via Skype is Alan Berry, president and CEO at Scratch Wireless. Alan, you're up in the monitor. I'm going to start with you. What is your take on this proposed merger? Is it good for the consumer?
I think that it will be, actually. I think this is a little better than what we saw with Comcast, simply because of the organizations involved.
Okay, and what your company actually provides wireless telephones to people? Is that what it is, that bypass traditional 4G networks?
Yes, at Scratch Wireless, we provide what we refer to as Wi-Fi first services, which allow the consumer to utilize Wi-Fi as the primary network and only use cellular to fill in the gaps. This is exactly in line with the cable industry strategy to provide Wi-Fi on a much broader basis. You can provide services in an incredibly low-cost manner, and at Scratch Wireless, we provide free mobile phone service, which is unheard of in the United States.
Sounds great, Alan. I'm going to hold you right there. I'm going to turn to Elura. Elura, what do you make of this proposed merger? I'll tell you what I think first, which is there's no competition in the cable industry to begin with. To merge two more giants just means that they're going to hold us hostage again.
Well, I don't know that that's entirely true, because first off, there are many small cable companies, and although in many respects, in other kinds of business, a small business is no match for a much larger business, that's not actually the case in the cable industry. In the cable industry, you know, the fact that the companies are very large don't necessarily mean that they're operating very different from a much smaller competitor within a certain geographic area. So the choices that a consumer has, for example, like my choices are between Comcast and Verizon, where I live, that wouldn't necessarily change, even if it were if my choices were between, say, Time Warner and Verizon, I would still have that choice.
Are geographic regions limited to the cable providers that can provide cable?
Are the regions? Yes, they are.
Right.
So in that way, it makes this merger really quite different than a similar merger between other types of businesses. And the fact that Comcast is still out there as such a giant makes this particular deal different than the past deals, because Comcast will still be there. And now we have Charter, a smaller company, buying a larger company. And then the much smaller companies will also continue to exist. So it may not necessarily change the landscape of what's available to the ultimate consumer very much at all.
Okay, I want to shoot myself whenever I call the cable company. I hate it that much.
Well,
literally,
I think we all have that.
I can't stand it. Where I have cut my cable to the bare bones to be spiteful. Tom, what's your take on the cable industry merger?
Okay, I believe it is a horrible strategic decision, and I'll tell you why. So if you look at Comcast, which was the right way, they actually bought out NBC, right? Content is king right now. That's why Netflix is absolutely killing it. There's more subscribers than HBO at this point. So, and people with Netflix are very loyal. Even Amazon's getting in that game. So the interaction with the end user, which is the watcher, is being controlled by the content providers. All the cable companies are at this point is just a medium to get there, right? It's not going to change, as you alluded to. But in this particular case, if they were going to invest their money, they're better investing in content. Think about it. Your cable bill is this. There's TV, cable, and phone, right? As the Scratch Wireless CEO said, that's coming down because there'll be free services. So the phone portion is going to come down. Now the cable portion is going to come down. Why? Because I'm going to watch all my stuff online. I'm going to watch Netflix. I'm going to watch Amazon. And when Apple TV gets their act together, which they will, I'm going to get away from cable. The money's not in cable right now. The cable's in content. That's why this is a horrible deal.
The only issue there is that there's still some content like news and sports that are never going to be available on a service like Netflix. So I think the cable company...
Never say never.
Well, I mean,
they could be live
right
streaming
now,
eventually on Netflix
at least right now,
well,
that's not what's going on. So it seems like what the cable companies are doing is they're putting all of their eggs in the basket of being the delivery service with respect to internet, and I think that's their plan instead of investing in the content piece. And I mean, it could be. Well, we won't know really until later. whether it would have been better to invest in making the content, or it would have been better to do what they're doing, which is put their investment in the delivery service. Of that content.
I agree with that.
Doctor, I know you're a businessman as well. You deal with mergers. Right. What's your take on this? And my other question for you is also, should internet just be free?
You would think so, right?
Nice.
But I don't know about that. But I did merge my company with a larger national organization. And I have to say, this whole thing brings up a real conflict, because for me, I thought as a smaller entity, we did provide a lot of good things for the larger organization. I thought and also going back towards me, we benefited by being part of something bigger, a lot of different ways. They had a bigger HR department, they had a team that could help us grow, and a lot of things. However, I see the other side of this, though, that you get these big corporations and they're interested in numbers and money and the bottom line, and as you say, they're not really interested in the consumer or the person out there. And you see this a lot, of course, with the insurance industry, where they merge and they don't care about doctors, they don't care about patients, and in this case, I wonder about the customer.
I mean, theoretically, this has the possibility of being good for a customer. Now, I don't know that any of the cable companies are making customers feel like they're putting customers first anyway. I don't think anyone walks away saying that they love their cable company. They treat it like a utility in that they have to buy it.
Correct.
But I mean, theoretically, there will be economies of scale that become the result of this. And then instead of our cable bill going up, 5% or however much it is every year, theoretically it could go up just a little bit less every year.
I think cable as we know it is going to disappear. It's going to be all viewing on demand. People like Tom, people like me, almost everybody I speak to nowadays says, I don't watch network TV, I watch an entire season of Gotham on Netflix or whatever it is.
Correct.
So the industry is changing. What I have a problem with, Elura, is the fact that I pay for the same service time and time again. I pay for internet on my phone. I pay for internet on my house. I pay for internet on my son's phone. I pay for internet on my vacation house. I'm paying hundreds of dollars a month for internet service. Yeah,
I mean, it's a problem. And I think that you're hitting on exactly what's frustrating when just as the general public, when we look about to the news of these mergers, and we're saying, but where does the public fall into this? Because that's great that the shareholders of Time Warner are going to walk away with some money. That's great that the CEOs of these companies maybe will benefit. That's terrific for them. How are we going to benefit? And our potential benefit is really incremental in the long run. It's not something that we're going to see tomorrow. It's not something that's going to make a huge difference, except maybe for the fact that we have two large companies coming together. Maybe there'll be better research and development between them. Maybe we'll get better service someday. I doubt it'll be cheaper, though.
I alluded to this before, that perhaps municipalities should provide free internet service. And in New York City, it has pressured Time Warner Cable to offer basic internet service at $14.95 a month. So governments can do something on this plane. Tom, what's your thought?
Okay, so one, don't want the government to regulate it per se, because once the government regulates something, it just goes to crap, right? I don't want them to provide it, because they're even worse as a provider. But I do respectfully disagree with your point.
But they do provide things like, well, actually they have private intermediaries. I was going to say water and so forth. But,
correct. Yeah, but some of that's privatized, so it depends, right? So in terms of this particular deal, horrible deal across the board. Again, they should buy into content. So if I'm a Time Warner shareholder, I'd be pretty upset regardless of what the valuation currently is. And then in terms of the end user, because they're going to have a bigger market share, they may lower the price a little bit, but they'll be less incentivized because they're going to have a monopoly. So if they're going to have a monopoly in an antiquated market, they're going to gouge your customers, and the service is not going to get better. Think about it. You have two trucks of two companies. Now they're going to go ahead and get rid of one truck, and they might even have less resources for a given area. And number two, they got to pay for it. How are they going to pay for it? With your income as a consumer. So I think it's bad for the consumer as well.
My understanding is that this is not really going to create a true monopoly situation, that the choices that exist currently will still continue to exist.
But almost 100% of the market will be controlled by four companies: Comcast, Time Warner's merger.
Because it's regulated, right? Kind of like, remember the old cell phones, there was 2-3 companies, and then now there's a gazillion of them. There's starting to be more. With this particular case, when it does get deregulated, they will have they have a monopoly now, but they'll have it'll get broken up when it gets deregulated. But until then, it's going to be expensive.
Okay, let's turn to Alan once again, joining us via Skype. You've been listening to our conversation. Alan, what's your take on this? You said in the beginning you think the consumer will win. Why is that? With fewer choices, I would think that would be less likely to win.
Well, I think you just pointed out one of the important attributes of that, and that is that you're paying for high-speed internet in a bunch of different ways in a bunch of different places. And as a result of this merger, there can be a lot of services that can be consolidated and provided to you as a consumer. So if you have a vacation home on one hand, and you've got your home and you've got your office, you have to obtain those services through multiple entities. Your wireless is another example. Why not cut your wireless bill out of your expenses altogether? And that's one potential benefit that this merger can actually provide to you.
Oh, right, Alan. Alan sounds a little bit like Darth Vader there. You are my son, Luke. Elura, tell me. That's his cable internet provider that is messing up the signal, but not Scratch Wireless. If it was on a Scratch Wireless network, everything would be perfect.
Clean.
Right.
Exactly. Elura, tell me about, give me a final thought here on this merger.
I mean, I would like to see it work. I think it probably will go through because of the existence of Comcast, and I would like to be hopeful that this is a great example of capitalism working the way it should work and having a free market work the way it should work. Whether that will actually happen remains to be seen, but I think that there's real potential for it.
Dun, 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 dun. We will protect the name of the innocents. Okay.
Still a horrible deal, though.
Still a horrible deal. Okay,
Still a
we will
horrible deal.
agree to disagree, and we'll keep these guys separated so they don't fight. Thanks, Elura, for
Thank
joining
you.
us today. Thank you, Alan, also joining us today. And the rest of the Ebru think tank will be back. Still to come on Fresh Outlook, why BB's family is singing the blues. And they're not talking about muddy shoes after this.